I am recording this. I am recording this starting now. So please note that this is being recorded and will be posted later if anyone wants to watch this afterwards. Okay. Yeah, so I will open this up to David, and then he'll open it up to the panelists.
Thanks, Tayon. Appreciate it. Thanks, everyone, for joining us tonight. Thanks, John and Tom and Jeremy, for agreeing to give some of your time and expertise to tonight. Merci à tous et à toutes pour votre assistance ce soir pour une discussion très importante pour l'avenir de notre ville. Je crois que John peut répondre en français si vous voulez demander une question en français. Et moi aussi.
Sorry, David, I just muted you. Can you unmute yourself?
Okay, there we go. I'll just start by saying virtually we're gathering here on the unceded territory and unsurrendered territory of the Wolastoqey people, whose relationship we have with them is governed by the peace and friendship treaties that have been signed over quite a period of time starting in 1725. We are blessed to live on this territory and to have as our direct neighbors within the communities here, St. Mary's First Nation. So I'm really excited about tonight. The Old Justice Building is a beautiful building, and I always think about it as kind of a structural anchor to the heart and soul of downtown Fredericton. It's an extraordinary place, both inside and out, tremendous potential. And this is an opportunity to chat about, as a community, what would we like to see happen there? Because we know that it's not going to be the Justice Building much longer as the new one is being built. And I certainly believe the community should get ahead of the ball here and have a conversation about where this needs to go before Department of Transportation Infrastructure starts thinking deeply about it as well, so that we've got that feedback and that input that I can help provide as we go along as your representative. So without any further ado here, let's get started, and I'll turn it over to, I think John is going first.
Great. Thanks so much, David, and everyone. It's a pleasure, and it's great to see so many familiar faces and the interest in this. As many of you know, architecture and certainly the health and vibrancy of Fredericton downtown is something very near and dear to my heart, and try to be I guess beyond a champion, but an advocate for this. And for preservation, but adaptive reuse is really so much of the way to go for this building. And I'm excited to talk about it because it is exciting. This building can have so much more life to it that can give so much to the city and to the downtown, and in fact, the province, in finding the right use and understanding how to handle this building and going with the right approach. It's an honor to be with Tom and Jeremy, two people that I've worked with and collaborated with, and I have a lot of time for their expertise. And so I'm really excited to be part of this panel. So I'm going to share my screen, going to show a short PowerPoint here. There we go. And view, there we go, slideshow. Okay. So try to be brief. There's lots to talk about. The Justice Building, it's one of the greatest buildings in Fredericton, but it's been much maligned, I think, of late and misunderstood because of its current role. It's a courthouse. There's very few people I know that have actually been inside the building. The last, unless you've been involved in a court case, which hopefully went okay for your side if you were involved with one. There's very little reason for the public to go in. And in fact, the public, you can't just walk in, you have to still go through security and so on. But that's the opposite of what that building was built for. It was built as a provincial normal school. And it was built as really this kind of provincial iconic place where people would gather. It was a place of education, a place of communal energy and education and inspiration. And I think it's time for it to become that again. But it's an icon of downtown Fredericton. And in collaboration with City Hall, it creates, and of course, Phoenix Square, one of the great streetscapes of New Brunswick and if not Eastern Canada. What you're looking at here, obviously the City Hall, you can tell in the middle, and the Randolph building at the far left. The building to the right, a lot of people say, well, that's the Justice building because of the triple entry with the columns. Well, it's not. That's its predecessor. The original provincial normal school was built there in 1876. So what you have now, the current building, is basically the son or grandson of that building, if you will. As you know, it's in the kind of, they call it now the historic Garrison District, but it was in the military base. Those 2 blocks of downtown were the Army base. And by the later 19th century, as there was less use of it, need of it for other buildings, military buildings and a drill hall, the space was given over to the provincial government for its normal school, where it was actually the teachers' college, where the teachers would go to learn. So the same architects, the same year, built this building, McKean and Fairweather, in 1876, and you can see how it mimics City Hall in its volume, Second Empire style. And here's a color postcard. It was stone and red brick, just like City Hall. So for almost 150 years, that corner of Queen and York has held this iconic building that architecturally was in many ways an equal to our great City Hall. So unfortunately, that building, or at least the front of it, burned in 1929. In fact, there's a plaque as you walk in memorializing that and the people involved with the building of the new one. There you can see the firefighters in 1929. What they did right away is in 1930, they built its new replacement, and they built it in a newer modern style. And so funny enough, when you consider the streetscape of Queen Street, we think certainly of City Hall and the legislature buildings from the 1870s, 1880s. This building is from 1930. It's not even 100 years old, at least the front section. The rear section where Dance Fredericton is survived the fire, and you can tell the brick is a little bit different, and we'll talk about that in a second. It actually is from the original. So you have these 2 wings, a little bit like Parliament in Ottawa. Half of it burned and some of it didn't. So it's amalgam of 2 separate buildings. What did survive from the front, and this iconic bit, is this kind of triple arched entryway, these 3 Gothic arches with this beautiful St. George pink granite colonnaded entry, which was saved from the original building and put back here. And that's why you can see it says Justice in the middle, and the 2 dates, 1876, 1930. So the first of the first normal school in 1930 when this one was built. And you can see the shields at the very top next to New Brunswick say PNS for Provincial Normal School. And if you look on a sunny day when the sun is just right, where it says Justice, you can actually make out the word normal school, which they cut those letters off and then cut Justice back inside and recessed it. But so it still has those hints of it. But this building is not that old, okay? So it's still steel structure, again, with stone and brick, but it's extremely well built and has been very well maintained by the provincial government. Have owned it, the building on the site for a long time. Here's some floor plans, just so you can get a sense of it. It's a 4-story building. And on what do you call the first floor, which is a bit above, but it's the lower floor, you go down a little bit. So it's not a basement because there's so much light, but basically you go down a few steps to below. The main building is kind of this T-shaped form. And remember, it was a school. It was a provincial normal school. There's classes. So there's these 1,000-square-foot rooms. You can see one here. The 2 at the very sides are still open, where they were courtrooms. But the ones in the middle have been filled in by sort of newer, non-structural walls and bathrooms for judges, offices, lawyers, that kind of thing. And in the back here where Gallery Connection used to be, unfortunately floods quite often with storage and so on. But this back here, that rectangle is the original, part of the original building. Second floor, on the main floor, again, you walk in the middle. There were 4 large rooms in the front. Many have been kind of divided up. And there's quite a wonderful metal staircase. really wide public corridor. And right in here where the main courtroom is, where you can see my mouse going, that at one time was a large 400-seat auditorium. So downtown was one of downtown's main theaters and auditoriums before the Playhouse. This was downtown's main theater. And you can see the large space where Dance Fredericton is. This was sort of the school's auditorium. So there's some large potential public spaces in here. Third floor is very similar in layout, and the fourth floor, there's this adjunct at the top, which goes in the front. The building itself is 67,000 square feet. Okay, so just remember that, 67,000 square feet. Here's a view of it from Google Earth, the 3D. You can see the building is in the absolute hub, the epicenter of downtown Fredericton, but also the sort of government civic institutional hub. So you can see the Justice Building here, and there's the older section. You can see the brick is a little different. It's a little bit pinker than the newer kind of 1930s red brick. So you obviously City Hall and Phoenix Square here to the left, and this wonderful street, Queen Street, one of the great streets of Canada. The College of Craft and Design campus right here with the old Soldiers Barracks, Guardhouse, the library. So the potential of this between culture and creativity and civic government institution, tourism, shopping is enormous. And I'll get into some other things there, which I'd like to say. It has this wonderful green space in front, and it's set back to actually align with the City Hall. As the two buildings, as I said, were originally built by the same architect, had this great sort of city beautiful movement to give this grand city presence, which is a wonderful green space in the middle of the city. And the side that faces York Street, here you can see this kind of overlooked main entrance, this wonderful Gothic arch with, again, more of the pink granite columns. So it has this direct entrance which faces City Hall and York Street. And here, there's the original section, the Dance Fredericton Studios. You can see these large windows right here, which are that way because they were the windows to the auditorium. This tall double height space, and you can see as they kind of go up here, this is where the balcony would have been in the auditorium. So very few people would remember that, but it's, again, this wonderful sort of public space. So what can this building be? In my opinion, what can it be? That's part of our discussion today. My deep-seated opinion is this wants to be a publicly facing building again. It was built to be a place where people gathered. It was basically built as a school where people would come together to learn, a place of education, a place of communal spirit, a place to inspire. That's what it wants to be. We think of Fredericton now as the IT capital, the city of culture and of learning with their universities and getting together and debate with civics and so on and government. That's what this can be. Right next to City Hall on the street, it was meant as an institutional building, and that's what it wants to be. It would also be the most cost-effective way to do it, because the building now, so you say it's been well maintained, for the right use could almost move in there now and use it as it is with some non-structural uses. One thing I do want to say is there may be some folks that think, oh, this would be a wonderful instance to put some housing in there. I think that housing would actually be the absolute wrong approach to this. I'm all about adaptive reuse and making certain buildings housing if they can be. This one does not want to be housing. In the middle, right next to City Hall and between all these other kind of cultural institutional buildings, it wants to join that group. And I think its potential as a place, again, of whether it's IT, cultural groups, educational groups, whether you're between the College of Craft and Design, City Hall, the potential for this is enormous. I will say, without putting too much ahead, starting about 4 years ago, John McLaughlin, the former president of UNB and still great prominent Fredericton citizen who cares deeply about this place, he asked me and a group of individuals to convene this group to look at the repurposing of the Justice Building. What could other uses, basically equivalent of what we're doing today. And he invited the then mayor of Fredericton, Mike O'Brien, then the principal of the College of Craft and Design, who was Mark Braithwaite at the time, representative of UNB from the TME Technology Entrepreneurship Department, Durendra Shukla. And we brainstormed about this, and we figured out this use that we discussed the potential and the interest of whether those groups and some others to have this place where kindred spirits and minds, you could have these sort of collisions of creativity and whether it was IT or basically startups or so on, together with students and artists and creatives and government offices that even at the time, the city of Fredericton potentially had some uses for it. So there's a lot of interest in that. It sort of died off for a bit. There's some change in leadership, as you know, with some of those groups, but it's starting again. So I'm in the midst of having some initial discussions. There is some interest in this. There's been, nothing obviously set in stone, very initial discussions. Some of this has been discussed with Minister of DTI, but again, we're just sort of putting some things out there on what this building could be, because there's a lot of interest from all those parties to make this building be what it wants to be again. And it wants to be a great public serving cultural, I think, intellectual, giving monument to the people of New Brunswick and Fredericton. So I've gone on probably far too long. We got lots more Q&A. So anyway, thank you very much.
Thanks, John. We are going to open up for Q&A after the panelists have all spoken. So next is Tom Morrison. Tom, can you unmute yourself?
I'll say that there's always a bit of a risk if you don't let people interrupt me. I mean, I'll sit quietly in a corner until I get going on random details, and then I completely miss social cues, but we'll give this a shot. Listening to John talk made me want to revise my entire thoughts and notes on what I could talk about today. So I would have put a few little inserts, then switch back to what I was thinking about. One of the cores I think that John captures so well is that buildings are really about people, right? Like it's great for us to sit and say, hey, there's the stone or the brick or the steel or the what have you. But really they're about the people that are using them, how they're getting used, how that interacts with your surroundings, how that builds community, and how that builds for our future. I want to touch back on some of the structure that John mentioned. I will point out that on a engineering side, here I am as an engineering saying buildings are about people, but that's what I'll go with. From the engineering side, there are very practical and approachable ways to deal with this building. There are some challenges, but in the same way there are opportunities. And I want to talk about one of the opportunities that's not really being talked about. And I'm going to talk a bit more generally for a second, that our existing buildings is a place where the construction industry can really take advantage of the opportunity to make better cities or better towns or better municipalities and communities, and to fight climate change at the same time. These are two things we're trying to do. And these existing buildings and how we use them is a way we can get there. This is a big opportunity. If we channel here a little bit of Carl Elefante, I'm going to get John. I'm going to ask you a question in just a second. So if you unmute yourself, I'll ask John. The greenest building is
The existing building.
The one that already exists. If we're still the exact quote. So we want to come back around to that, because in the end we can get caught up in details. I'm an engineer. I work with details, and I know how easy it can be. It can be overwhelming, and that it can be misleading because you're not seeing a whole picture. But again and again, if we step back and say, okay, let's look at whole life carbon accounting is a statement they're using now. If you look at whole life carbon accounting, you start seeing something very clearly. I'm going to ask David and Jeremy to finish this off for me. The greenest building is?
The building is already there.
Right. This is not brain surgery. This is the pattern we build off of again and again and again when we work with this. So why is this important, right? Like we're coming at the climate challenge, which is something I've been musing more and more on. I find it something that everyone should be caring about, not just people that are quote unquote in sustainability, that we all should care about how this happens. And when I look at the details of the construction industry, I think, well, let's look at how much carbon emissions, how many greenhouse emissions are coming from making concrete. It's actually making the cement, but that we use for concrete. Everyone knows we use concrete everywhere where we build. The Portland cement industry has greater emissions than the country of India. Period. Right? This is the volume of pollution coming in the new construction world. We just gets in the news a little bit, things like the impacts on the fact we eat meat, right? Like, okay, we eat meat, our cows are making methane, our cows are making these greenhouse gases. That's accounting for about 6% globally. And so there's this push saying we should be more vegetarian in our diet. Well, new construction is 12 to 14%, and we're not talking about it. The other day I looked at the news and it's talking about textiles, how bad it is that textiles are filling our landfills and how much it's a problem that we're wasting our clothes, because textiles, all this waste clothing, is 8% of our landfills. The construction industry is filling 50% of our landfills, and we're not talking about it. So again, I'm going to open the question for anyone. The greenest building is, you're leaving me hanging, who's going to chime in?
The Justice Building.
The one that already exists.
There we go. This is all we're headed for, and we can get into the details of where that comes from and why. But this is really important. Now, unfortunately, if I'm again looking at just one aspect, because dealing why we save a building, there's so many reasons, and so I'm just picking one that's not always talked about. We look at this one aspect. Why are we not saving buildings? Like, what is this obstacle that we're hitting? And unfortunately, part of the obstacle is just the nature of the construction industry. And again, we'll talk in generalities. We're not going to talk about specifics because individuals are quite intelligent and quick, but you get a big industry and it gets kind of set in its paths. So why is the industry struggling to deal with existing buildings? We could pick a few different avenues to start this. And I'm going to just touch on some of them quickly to say why how we're currently seeing our built surroundings is causing problems. First, I want to talk about just the mentality that we have to defend keeping a building. Because in some ways that thought, for those of us that work with a lot of existing buildings, in a panel like this, you're sitting there saying, is someone going to feel that we should demolish this and build, a 5-story apartment building on that site? Like, how have we gotten to the point we need to defend this? My favorite report, because it's so non-biased, is one done in 2006 by the US Department of Defense. They looked at stables. They looked at pre-World War II stables to decide if they needed to demolish them or if they should repurpose them into barracks and offices. Their study was fairly extensive, and it found overwhelmingly that they should be repurposing these buildings. This is not taking a beautifully built school with huge flexibility and changing it into some other public building. This is taking a stable for horses and changing it into office space. And they're saying it makes far more sense for them to do it. It made far more sense for them for the environmental impact, for the quality of space they received, for the cost of it. And so of the 4 major, the big giant reports the DoD in the US makes, but of the 4 major points, they need a statement that says, what do the decision makers need to know? 4 major points. First one, the default should always be to keep these buildings. How we end up in the other way, it boggles my mind. The default should always be that we keep these buildings. And number 2, that we need the professionals that can do it. And number 2 is one of the tricky parts. That's where we get down to the construction industry, because unfortunately, we don't really train people to work in existing buildings. We train people to do new buildings. How is that different? Well, it's kind of that difference between building something new and dealing with something you've got. It's the difference between the type of approach you want if you've got an assembly line for, let's say, a car, and you need to get everything done right, because no one wants to buy a car that the paint's all scratched up on, or no one wants to buy a car with slight little defects, even if they're cosmetic. And so that mindset, you need to get everything just right. But now, once the car exists, you don't take it to the assembly line worker, you take it to a mechanic. The mechanic has a completely different skill set. The mechanic skill set is trying to figure out, okay, what is the core of what's wrong? So our construction industry is only training the assembly line workers. So people are getting good at existing buildings. There are more and more of it, but on the education side, that's where everything's coming from. And we have this gap. Even the codes right now, and the development right now, they're saying, hey, we need to deal with existing buildings better. And they're getting people that design, that work predominantly with new construction to figure out how we're going to deal with existing buildings. Because you have to have experience with writing codes to work on a new area of the code. It's like, well, this is kind of odd. Or taking it further, what is the voice we hear? Where do we hear things about what should be done in construction? Why do people think putting in new windows is better for the environment? Like, think about where you've heard this. It's
TV tells you.
The TV tells you, right? It might just happen to be advertisements from people that make new windows because they've got big staffs. They can hire people that talk about this. So all of these things have geared towards new construction, and we've got this gap. So there's a huge opportunity. We've got lots of problems. We've got this issue that municipalities are dying because they cease to be interesting. And this, we need to retain these really cool sites, these things that stick out, these things that make someone feel like the space is special. Because we want to keep our communities vibrant. But we also want to fight climate change. And guess what? Keeping these buildings helps us fight climate change because, you guys get a heads up, because the greenest building is
The one that's already there.
There we go. So this should be an easy get. There's a huge opportunity. There is a challenge, but it can be overcome. And the Halifax study that someone just put in the chat is a great example of looking at just how this starts to break down. So I could go on, but I'm looking at my watch thinking I'm probably at my time. So I'll save more for questions, hopefully. Thank you very much.
Wow, you guys are awesome. I don't need to be here.
Hey, Tan, could I add
Yeah.
one thing real quick? Because there's one point that it follows exactly what Tom's saying, and I forgot to mention in my presentation. Take 10 seconds.
Shoot, yeah.
I mentioned as well for this, as well, beyond being the greenest building, oftentimes it makes sense as well. The most affordable building is the existing building, okay? I was gonna say this, 67,000 square feet in the Justice Building. To build that building today at the quality level it is with the brick and stone it's almost impossible to do today anyway, would be about $350 a square foot, okay? It's expensive, but that's about what it costs. A cheap sort of typical New Brunswick school today is $250 a square foot. So just so you know, buildings are expensive. $350 a square foot, so 6 times 67,000. To build the Justice Building today would be about a $25 million building. To build that building today. But it can be refurbished for a fraction of that. So just leading into what Tom, so you can get basically a $27 million building for a pittance. Why would we not do that?
Thank you, Tom and John. I'm going to ask Jeremy Mouet to unmute himself.
Thanks for the reminder, Tayon. It's the one thing I sometimes forget to do. I wanted to begin by confessing that my expertise is neither as an architect nor as an engineer. So I'm bringing, I don't know that it's a different skill set, but it's certainly something different than both Tom and John are able to bring to our discussion. I'm certainly going to be wide-ranging, and I hope I think it connects particularly with some of the things John was saying. For those of you other than John, Tom, and myself, we were given I think we were given two questions to ponder. And so I'm kind of focusing on those two questions in my remarks tonight. The first question, both questions concern the Justice Building, naturally. But the first was, why should it be preserved? And the second was, what valuable purpose could it provide the public after it no longer houses the court? I think that first question is the easiest to answer. Why should the Justice Building be preserved? Well, but I should fess up, I am the president of Fredericton Heritage Trust. We are committed to the preservation of the city's building stock. It will come, I hope, as no surprise to you that we're anxious to see the Justice Building preserved. But why? Why preserve it? Well, over the last number of years, we've seen the west end of Queen Street being transformed. As much as its heritage character, much of that character has been lost over that period. In many ways, the area around City Hall and the Justice Building, this is now more than ever the heart of downtown. To preserve the Justice Building is to commit to preserving a really key part of our city. So it's not just the fate of one building that we should be considering. It's the streetscape, the look and feel of the area around the Justice Building, as well as the building itself. If you stand in front of it, and look around, look up and down Queen Street, you get a sense of a really unique downtown. A view that includes, as John drew our attention to in the photos he showed, the view includes City Hall, the adjacent Randolph Building, and together the three buildings reflect a distinctive Fredericton style, one that was deliberately pursued once City Hall was built, and John pointed that out as well. Both the Randolph Building and the old Normal School, the original building, were designed to emulate City Hall, to reflect common design elements. Come back to the question, why should the Justice Building be preserved? It should be preserved as it is a key part of that central downtown streetscape, along with City Hall and the Randolph buildings. The buildings not only reflect a particular style, they also reflect particular historical currents of an earlier era. The construction of the Normal School in the mid-1870s heralded a new era in New Brunswick history. Just a few years earlier, education had become free. Before that, it wasn't. With free education, there was tremendous demand for teachers. They needed a normal school to educate the teachers, to educate the children. So the genesis of this building is from a particular part of our history, the province's history. And thinking about the area in a different way, few other jurisdictions in Canada can match the wealth of heritage buildings that Fredericton has. I know I'm preaching to the choir at this point. Nonetheless, I will persevere. I want to read a very brief excerpt from the well-known travel guide series, The Lonely Planet. This is its opening description of Fredericton from the Lonely Planet Guide to Atlantic Canada. This is what it has to say about Fredericton. Begins, this gorgeous provincial capital does quaint very well. The St. John River curves lazily through Fredericton, past the stately government buildings on the waterfront and the university on the hill. Its neatly mowed tree-lined banks are dotted with fountains, walking paths, and playing fields. On warm weekends, the green, as it's known, looks like something out of a watercolor painting. Families strolling, kids kicking soccer balls, couples picnicking. On a flat, broad curve in the riverbank, the small downtown commercial district is a neat grid of red brick storefronts. Okay, so getting back to that question, why should the Justice Building be preserved? It should be preserved so that it'll continue to feature in and contribute to the character of Fredericton's downtown core. As that passage in The Lonely Planet indicated, others refer to our city in fulsome and flattering terms. Let's not lose that. We really shouldn't mess it up. What we have is priceless, and it's fragile. The second question we were given to ponder was perhaps more speculative or invites a more speculative response. What valuable purpose could it, the Justice Building, provide the public after it no longer houses the courts? I'd begin by saying that we have been given a really exciting opportunity. And I think that comes out in both John and Tom's comments. We've been given the chance to imagine a host of possible valuable purposes, all manner of what ifs. This reminds me of the example of the railway. The end of the railway service, which was a vital transportation link, this was often seen as an economic disaster for smaller communities. And sometimes it did spell the end of once prosperous towns and villages. But one of the many great features of our city is the extraordinary network of trails. And I like to think of these trails as the shadows or perhaps the ghosts, as they are, of former railway lines. Then there's the Bill Thorpe walking bridge, as well as the repurposed railway roundhouse, now brewery, on the north end of that bridge. The trails and walking bridge have become a key feature of our city, but they only became possible when the railway tracks were lifted and a new purpose for that space could be imagined. That's where we're at with the Justice Building. One point worth stressing is that Fredericton has had plenty experience with creative recycling of its public buildings. The Justice Building itself, it didn't start out, as John pointed out, it didn't start out as a Justice Building at all, but it's a normal school. And as I've noted already, after it burned down in 1929, its replacement was still intended as a normal school, became a teacher's college in 1947. In 1964, the teacher's college left the building, moved up the hill to the University of New Brunswick. In the late 60s, early 70s, the Justice Building was briefly the high school before FHS opened in 1973. In the mid-1970s, the old normal school, come teacher's college, come high school, became the Justice Building. It can handle another change. Nor, of course, is the Justice Building alone in having more than one purpose over the years. Other well-known public buildings that have changed their roles over time include Government House, today's New Brunswick Sports Hall of Fame, which began in 1881 as Fredericton's Post Office and Customs House, the old Marysville Mill, which has become government offices and renamed Marysville Place. What can we imagine for the Justice Building? What purpose could be embraced by most people, could bring direct cultural and economic benefits, would contribute to improving or revitalizing a key part of downtown? I think those are difficult questions, ones to which I don't think there's an obvious or easy answer. Or perhaps there's one, and I did this independently of learning of John's experiences. It seems to me that developing some relationship with the New Brunswick College of Craft and Design would make sense. I have no idea if some relationship might be possible, but the college is close by the Justice Building. That said, I think my job this evening and that of John and Tom was simply to set the stage for a broader conversation about possible alternative uses for the Justice Building. I think there's a lot to think about, and there's plenty of new futures that we need to try to imagine. And that's short, but that's all I had to say, Alan.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. That's perfect. We are now at 7:40, which is exactly when we're opening the floor to questions and answers. And I see that Shelley Petite has had her hand up for a while. Shelley.
Hi, thank you. I have two questions. The first one I'm sure is not going to surprise David at all. How are you going to address the accessibility issues? And please don't tell me by going around back, because if I can't use the front door, then nobody can use the front door. And accessibility is going to be huge here. This notion of sending people around to a side door or a back door is not accessibility. It's ableism, so we need to change that. So how are you going to address accessibility in there? And in terms of ideas or possible, something along the line of what they did in St. John with the Waterloo Village, but instead of building all new, repurposing, which I'm so glad you're doing, is great. And it's become like a community grab all. So they have training facilities for new not-for-profits to start up, for community meets. Even during COVID, they were using it sometimes just to help groups get together that had to pass out COVID tests to people. So it's a good meeting hub and it works great. But I'm just wondering how you're going to address the accessibility issues in that building, whatever you choose to do.
Maybe
maybe,
I have no experience in that, but some of the others who've been involved in repurposing old buildings would, I'm sure, have some ideas. Surely all things are possible. John, or
sure, I can speak that just briefly, David. No, thanks, Shelley. And look, I'm with you. I was lucky. No, I was in a wheelchair for about a year myself, so I've luckily, not now, but I live the downtown Fredericton accessibility issue and realized that actually almost every single store along Queen Street you can't get to in a wheelchair because they have about a 4-inch lip of stone, and they might as well be a 10-foot wall. So I get it, and I've lived it, and so it matters to me. The only thing I'd say to be careful now is I just caution you approaching a project like this. It doesn't even have a reuse yet. So I think that the thing to know is that the sensibilities need to be there, that whatever it becomes, accessibility is a key aspect of making that, a public or a useful, valuable 21st century building. So I think you never want to start with that, but know that that's a key part of whatever has to happen. So I would agree with you, but it's too early to know because you just don't know yet. The one thing I will say is the artsy entrance looks like it's kind of a ground level, right? But you go up some steps, there's another steps. That main level is effectively about like 8 feet off the ground. The ramp to get to that would be like 160 feet long. I mean, there's some issues. There's some real challenges that would have to come in the design aspect, knowing what it is. So it's too early to answer it yet, but it's a key part of figuring out what that would be.
thanks, John.
I might make some comment on that, I guess, too, just because I think accessibility is huge, and I can't claim any personal experience, so I won't try to. If you're talking about a new building, and this is one of those areas that it gets lost. If you're talking about a new building, something that doesn't exist, it only exists in paper, it's very easy to say we will ensure there's full accessibility. And this is why we get caught with the existing buildings a little bit, because it does take some thought. Ideally, whatever group that's designing it, sitting down with someone that knows what it's like trying to get around, and they work collaboratively, whether they have someone that's on their team in the design world or whether they're getting outside input to figure out how to make sure it's met. I've seen a lot of different examples, and all of them will kind of, they might satisfy one thing or satisfy another. Some of them could satisfy all the needs, but I think the thought that sticks in my mind is it needs to be an integral part of design. For this size of project, there'd be no reason why it can't be fully met. But if you get too trying to say exactly how you would do it too early, and it gets complicated in the planning in a way. It's like trying to fix the font underneath my pictures before I finish writing the report. Once the things start coming together, you ensure that's there at the table the entire way through, and it's clear, but it's hard to say until you do the design.
Yeah, but it has to still be, don't forget, we've been too often forgotten and overlooked and made a last point. We're 26.7% of the New Brunswick population, and it's now the law, right? So it has to be including how to get in that front door. There are many cool contraptions, and yes, they're expensive. I get that. But why not be a leader? If you're going to be a leader and show to repurpose this building, then be a leader and show how to make it better accessible as well. Yep. Because we're just know we're getting tired, and we're not, we're standing up too, right? And we're making noise, and we want to see this happen, but we're going to expect the accessibility there, and to have someone say, well, don't, we'll think about, like, no.
What would be your ideal kind of framework for
I'm not an architect, so I don't know, but you need a way, like, people don't understand little statements that they make, like, oh, we'll just put you around the back. Then change the main entrance to the back. Yeah. Everybody goes in the back, then that's fair. Do you know what I mean? There's a way you can do that to make that and protect that beautiful front entrance, but everybody goes in through the back, because it's not just persons with disabilities, you're talking seniors, you're talking moms with strollers, depending on what you're putting in there. So a lot of people could have that. Within the building, you've got to have lifts or elevators. You've got to have proper washrooms, right? You've got to have lower counters or whatever you're putting in there so that people that need it if they're in a wheelchair, they can use it, right? You have to have some grips. There's
So
all
the-
kinds of things you have to have.
The one comment I would put on it is, I mean, let's say for type of spaces,
Mm-hmm.
say it became office spaces and stores and a restaurant and something like that. How someone fits up their office isn't really something we can decide in this conversation. So it should be part of what's pushed for. Whoever purchases the building, it needs to be there. And I've seen buildings that could be made accessible thrown out because it was
But now it's the law.
not too early. No,
Right.
I agree.
And I know you get that. I know you get that, right? Yeah.
My criticism on the construction industry is that that's not considered throughout.
Yes.
My criticism on the construction industry is that comes up last minute in all designs.
And then they panic, right?
So
Okay.
that's why I'm saying it should be in through there, but it's the design process.
Tom and Sally?
I'm gonna
Tom and Sally?
I'm gonna wrap
we could
this
spend
up.
every day on this. Yep. So
I'm going to wrap it up because
Yep.
we've got limited time and everyone is, I'm trying to keep it to 7 minutes for each question. And we've got Sarah Davidson with her hand up. So I will ask Sarah to unmute herself.
Hi there. Thanks so much for the opportunity. Thank you to the excellent panel as well. That was really inspiring. So the things I just wanted to, I'll try to frame a question. It's probably more to share some ideas and then I guess end with questions about that. For some of you who might have heard me talk before, a lot of the work I do is with the more vulnerable population in the city. And I also live right downtown. And part of the reason I do is because it's a beautiful, vibrant city. I moved with my partner years ago from a much bigger city and we just love downtown Fredericton. I live downtown and preservation of old buildings is really key. But another part that I guess I've noticed over the years, where I used to live there, every little sort of neighborhood, every little urban kind of ethnic neighborhood had its own little community center. And it was really nice because it was sort of a central spot for people to come from kind of all walks of life in that area. So you'd have single moms with their strollers, you'd have old guys playing dominoes together, you'd have English language classes, you'd have yoga, you'd have people with lattes. Like it was a lovely spot of this mashup of different perspectives and different people. And it's one thing in Fredericton that I've kind of missed over the years. I mean, we have the YMCA, which is a beautiful building, but it's a little bit more like a really beautiful gym with a lot of resources. And I know they've got sliding scale rates, but it does seem to serve a certain more athletic niche. Multicultural Association is a great facility, but again, it's got a specific mandate and specific group of people. The art galleries, so we have a lot of beautiful institutions, but there really isn't that spot that I've seen, the market somewhat maybe, but where there's a really big mashup of all different walks of life. And being the heart of the city, I feel like that is really the huge opportunity with this building, is to try to create that space. Like John LaRue, when you were speaking, I felt really moved because it's a lot of the same ideas. And especially during COVID, that we've noticed working with the most vulnerable population economically and the ones that experience a lot of marginalization, is there really was just nowhere for people to go. And a lot of people felt that, but it's especially hard for people that don't have a lot of the economic resources that I have or that other folks might have. Fredericton, part of the appeal is the great arts and crafts scene and the music scene and all that stuff. It does tend to cater a little bit more though to what kind of white collar and for people that have means to really be able to fully enjoy all of that. So my hope would be, and I'm not saying just create space for only vulnerable people at all, it's a huge building, but it's to really keep in mind the different tiers of where folks are able to access kind of community space. So more what I'm concretely speaking of would be, I would love to see something like a youth community theater be able to be performing in one of those old courtrooms to sort of bring a lot of healing to parts of that building that have been hard on youth. And to look at accessible spaces for people to join in. So I appreciate the gal just before me speaking about that. Whether the Crafts College could have flexible studios, but then after hours, they're available for people at really reasonable rates, or at least even delivered free, and students could have a chance to get credit by teaching people how to do stuff. Looking at having a wood shop where people that don't have really a room in their house, but they, like an old single guy living downtown somewhere that would love to work with his hands and he's quite isolated and lonely, he could have sort of a co-op kind of a wood shop space. Looking at just, multicultural association, having more that brings newcomers together, having a lot of the Indigenous healing, if we could do that in the downtown core as well. So I guess it's really an appeal to look at not just making this a beautiful space that people that want to sip lattes and look at beautiful art who already can get that again. I want that because that's me too, but I also want to create a space that really does meet the needs of a lot of the people. And so I know that's going to depend on who is in there and not necessarily this panel, but I just want to throw that appeal out early. The other thing we don't have, which could be one thing we've done well and we're world leaders recognized, is Service New Brunswick and Service Canada, which I know it's like, what does that have to do with it? But one thing I've hoped for is to actually have a hub of not-for-profits that can have collaborative space, which is flexible, that shares common admin staff, that shares common physical space. It's kind of like a networking hub that people can then come there and have services kind of wrap around them. So even whether it's, and it could just be a spot like a one-stop shopping where people could come in, they could see the community services, whether it's from art, creativity, expression, all the way through to just having social space to be not so isolated from other people. And then if you need to have some swishy, beautiful condos in there to help pay for it, like that's fine. But again, just that appeal to have a real mashup of different cultures, different spaces, and different economic streams. And again, if we could have a little spot, and there's a lot of talk in the not-for-profit community to want to have a lot more collaboration. And so it's a beautiful dynamic spot to be to meet a lot of different needs. So thank you for the opportunity. And I guess my question is, what do you think? Is that possible? Is there a way to envision that?
The big building.
There you go. So yeah, thank you, sir. What do I think? I think it's bang on. And one of the best parts about really, I don't want this to seem like a cliched response. The best part about your discussion, your question, is the enthusiasm of just being open to ideas and of people coming together. If you start from that spot, it will work out, right? Because that's what it wants to be a place where again, you don't want to sound cliched, but where Fredericton can come together. Multi-use is a great way to do that. And one of the beauties of this building, it has a tremendous amount of space, but different kinds of space. It has very, very large rooms, which can become anything. We have some 1,000 square foot classrooms that are about 14 feet tall. They're perfect for, again, we said for the cause, hey, photo studios, things they don't have now, for other things, for say wood shops. You could have maker spaces in there. One of the most tragic things I've seen, but full of potential, was if you're in the original wing in the back above Dance Fredericton, because there's a whole other floor above them. It's just file warehouse. It's where, and I see Bruce Noble on the call, he can probably back me up on this. It's where GNB stores just a lot of files. It is the most beautiful riverfront space in the city of Fredericton. We think the library is nice looking over the river. This is nicer. It's taller and bigger. And you have, it's one huge, probably 3,000 square foot open space. Could be anything. It could be exactly like the kind of thing you're talking about. So what's great is this building has the potential to become any of those things. So if you start from the spot of want to become a place that is of advantage to Fredericton and to us as a community, and not just sort of selfish profit making, it can become that. And because space is space, you can make things happen. And I think if you treat the space as it is, as wonderful space, restore it a little bit, it might need a little bit of fix up. It doesn't take that much to make it those things. The big open spaces can become programming for anything. So I'm with you.
Yeah, and as far as the structure goes, I mean, the great things about buildings built in that period and built for that purpose, they can take a whole bunch. Like different buildings favor different ways that they can be used. John's been talking a lot about what a building wants to be. And certain buildings, you get into expensive projects if you're trying to take something that's only ever made to hold an apartment and you're trying to put a gymnasium in it. That's challenging. In this case, it was made to hold a lot. It can still take a lot. Like if you get into actual evaluating how it works, you've got a lot of potential there. And I do feel I should apologize. I was trying to understand the prior problems, not trying to disagree with any of the statements. But yeah, so to support John, there's a huge amount you can do and a lot of potential once you've got the right marriage of groups.
Thank you so much, Sarah. That is really inspiring. And it's great to hear some really great ideas and getting us all thinking about them too in this group. Norm Laverty, you've got your hand up. Can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, this discussion is great. I had one question, but now I have two or three. but I'll just keep it to the one. When we look at, Fredericton seems to have a lot of experience in repurposing buildings. And I'm just wondering what we've learned, either positively or negatively. For instance, if we think of the Charlotte Street School, what have we learned from that experience? Or if we take the Victoria Health Center as another one, and then what I think are negative experiences is the old railway station, okay? What have we learned from those experiences in terms of repurposing?
Maybe I'll start. I was actually involved, Norm, as the architect on the Charlotte Street Arts Center when it came to be. And for those of you that remember, that came within a hair of being either demolished or sold to a developer as apartments, and it would have just neutered its potential. You can't imagine that part of Fredericton today without the Charlotte Street Arts Center. You know, the children's activities, cultural activities, the pizza, Mildred's Pizza in the basement, best pizza in town. And again, the different variety of uses and groups that are in there. But they had to fight with the government at the time. Now this was, 15, almost 20 years ago. It's a different sensibility now in a different way. And I don't think I'm pretty sure you wouldn't have that fight now of wanting them to kind of squeeze out every last ounce of return to that. So they gave it over to this volunteer committee, which did wonderful things. And the army military was involved to do the reconstruction, and it was sort of half restored, half reconfigured to be this multi-purpose place. And it's been an incredible success. The economic driver of that is just huge for very little income. So I think this would be sort of that times 5, but the potential there is, again, working with the spirit of the building. Don't fight it, as Tom's saying, don't fight it, work with it and allow those uses to be there. The thing about Fredericton, we have such a vibrant economy of everything from youth to seniors, and people want to be here and they want to be downtown. And so the fact that you have this great, beautifully designed and well-constructed building in the heart of downtown next to, again, commerce, government, education, culture, art, tourism, it's a no-brainer of what that can be. And I think getting the right use and the right people at the table, I think there's going to be huge buy-in. And now what you have now, which you didn't have 15 years ago with Charlotte Street Arts Center, is a whole sustainability embodied energy argument as well about repurposing a building and doing it as efficiently as possible. And again, one of the reasons I say this really shouldn't become housing is that would cost 3 or 4 times per square foot what just kind of repurposing it for kind of cultural educational groups like that would be. You'd have to basically gut the entire building and rebuild it. It doesn't want to be that. So it's knowing what the building wants to be. And so I think Charlotte Street Arts Center is a great example of where Fredericton really got it right through some people. It's kind of bottom-up planning, which is why, again, I think Dave and Taylor for this, is why conversations like this early on are so important. Figure out what the community wants and let's move forward that way.
I might extend upon that about what I'm hoping we've learned from all the successes we've had, because we've definitely had some major successes, is that to work with what we already have can take more thought, and it can take more time to get those great successes. There's always the temptation to get the quick answer. But if we're wanting better stuff, if we want to make these goals of being more sustainable, of having higher quality space, of spending less money to get there, making sure that everyone is involved with how they can use the space and these buildings are for people, it does take more thought than when you do something from scratch. And so I'm hoping we've been learning to give ourselves the time to make sure we get those solutions instead of feeling pressured by outside interests to act before they come through.
May I speak? Tayan?
I actually have some hands up that I want to get to. And so Peter Pacey and Bruce Noble and then Margot Shepard have been waiting. Myrna, if you raise your hand,
Yeah.
Did you want to respond to something?
I just wanted to say a couple of things, if I may. I live at the west end of the city, so I understand how, whatever. And I'm never quite sure which government is responsible, because I watch. I'm so pleased to see some city councillors here tonight, Thank you very much, because it's very important. But thing is, we tore down the Racine building, right? That was city
Myrna,
council.
I'm
Yeah.
so sorry, Myrna. I'm just going to put you
Okay.
on my list because I've got so many other
All right,
folks
good
that have
enough.
already been waiting.
Okay,
But I will add you to my list.
that's okay.
Next, we've got Peter Pacey.
Hi, thank you very much, and thank you to the panel for the wonderful synopsis of the possibilities of this and the necessity of it. I want to speak to this from a historical perspective, somewhat similar to Jeremy, because at one time I was the president of Heritage Trust, and one of the things I've done over my career in Fredericton, as being a Frederictonian, born and bred, is do a game that I call the Downtown Shuffle. And the Downtown Shuffle to me was simply looking forward to buildings that were going to come up for reuse or repurposing, and really being proactive about making that kind of thing happen. Now, with speaking of the normal school, I see Bruce on there, and I'm not sure how many other people might remember it as the normal school. Some people went to grade 10 there. It wasn't just FHS, it was only grade 10 part of FHS, because the original campus of FHS, of course, was on George Street. But as a normal school, I remember going there on Saturday mornings to cartoons, if you can believe it, in that 400-seat theater. And about 5 years ago, this sounds concurrent, John, to what you and President McLaughlin did. I approached Mark Braithwaite, who knew nothing about the building, and when he was head of the Craft College, and I said to Mark, let me take you over to this building. And at that time, Dance Fredericton was in the back, and of course Gallery Connection. And in fact, 25 years ago, I tried to get space in there up on the 3rd floor and was turned down. So Leslie, I know you're on there. I don't know how you got your foot in that door, but it was something political, and I know that for a fact. But here's my point. For my money, and for the best use of that building, I think the natural thing is actually to move the craft school in there. And what would we do with it? Well, the biggest part of it is there is the theater there that could be restored. And what would that do to the craft school? Well, there's a big piece that's missing in terms of craft and theater in Atlantic Canada, and especially in New Brunswick, and that is we have all kinds of theater programs at UMB and STU and so on, but we don't have anything for a school in terms of technicalities of theater. So I'm talking about set design and building. I'm talking about lighting design. I'm talking about costume design. Obviously, they have a clothing design part there, but if they had a costume design and costume building part of that, all of a sudden we would have a craft school which would add that to their envelope, and that would give a whole lot more young people in New Brunswick the opportunity to go into that field and continue into the professional things. And remember, it is a school, so it's full of perfect classroom-sized buildings. That back L is unbelievable, as John said. Up on the 3rd floor, there's a huge room. It looks like it has partitions now, but when I knew of it, at the time that Gallery Connection allowed us to put on our indoor performances there, when we were in the basement of the craft school for our headquarters, and we performed in Officer Square, as we did up until a couple of years ago when they started ruining Officer Square. The point is that building could be a school again. I think it's best as a craft school. David, I challenge you to talk to the people at Petal, because I know Mark went up the hill, or not up the hill, but up the ladder to talk to the people at Petal about this. And John, I know you and John McLaughlin and so on had this. Well, that was, I went to Mark before that, and he probably knew at the time you met with him about the building and had been toured through it by me. Anyway, I'm speaking quickly and forcefully because this is something that I feel very passionate about. And I'll tell you one other thing, and this is a huge red herring. I think we should be having exactly the conversation about the Playhouse building on Queen Street, because David, I know you're somebody who believes in a new Playhouse. I don't. I know, John, you're part of that letter that went to everybody. I think that's foolishness. We don't need a performing arts center. We need to keep the Playhouse and repurpose it. End of story. No question, just comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter. next we have Bruce Noble. Can you see you've unmuted yourself?
Yes, I have. Peter's right. Both my wife and Tom's parents attended grade 10 at the school. And I spent 6 years of my judicial career in an office that was right behind the fire escape that was on the west side of that building, adjacent to what was the auditorium and the largest court, the only court that could handle jury trials in our district. The building has good bones. John's made that very clear, but it is structurally problematic. It has a central elevator in the structure that is not accessible from the exterior going in the front doors. When there was discussion about accessibility, the big problem that there was for a period of time when one of the judges had mobility problems, serious mobility problems, and her office was on the front floor, on that level, that upper level, the elevator wasn't working. And as a consequence, they had to make arrangements to have a ramp temporarily set up, because the judge said, if I can't get into my office and I can't get into the court, I'm not going to go. So that's a problem in any construction, looking at that single elevator in the center of the building, accessible from only the exit on the ground floor, either from the back, from the Dance Fredericton section, coming through that way, or coming through the eastern side, the door, which is a fine situation, but it is a problem in any way, shape, or form. Providing elevators for that area is a structural change that needs to be considered significantly. I mention that in large part because that was the question about accessibility and the circumstances, and I do note that. When Peter's talking about a school, I think you've got to take into consideration climate change for this whole area. I was present in Fredericton when we had our first 1 in 100-year floods back in 1972, 73. I was here when we had our second 1 in 100-year floods in 1988. I was present here when we had our third and our fourth 1 in 100-year floods. And that building flooded. The back section of the building was flooded. And in the most recent ones, 2017, 2018, it didn't get flooded the second flood, but it did the first one. Not only that, but the area around it was flooded. So there was no access to that building. The courts had to move out, and we had the benefit of the Hugh John Fleming Center the first time. And we had it wasn't the Hugh John Fleming Center, but the second time was the Hugh John Fleming Center. It was a wonderful opportunity for us. It is not any use that you're going to look at for this building has to take climate change into consideration, which means you've got to recognize that you can't have a situation there where you can't move out. And you also have to understand that if the area around it is flooded and you can't get access to it, that's when they shut the power off. So you've got to be very careful. You can't use I understand the craft school's already there, and that is a different situation. But any kind of a school situation where you're going to be needing classroom space at the end of that particular time frame, or workshop space, you've got to take that into consideration. Type of use, as I said, I am going to suggest, John, I don't know if you'd seen the DTI's proposals for reconstruction of the building when we had the problem with the elevator and they were looking at it. They were looking at fairly big dollars for the reconstruction. And that, as I understood it, was part of the reason that they were looking at consideration for another location at one point. The back section, as I understood it, the upper floors were not available for office space because they had serious problems with them and they didn't want to spend the money on doing the work. All of which can change when you're looking at a repurposing of the building, but they are factors that may affect the cost and the circumstances. So I'm not giving you a whole lot of suggestions as to what you can use it for. What I'm saying is you have to take those factors into consideration.
And perhaps I can make comments on that, because I agree they need to be taken into consideration, but I'd say two food for thoughts. I mean, we're fortunate enough we collaborate with a firm in New York City a lot, where they are always adding elevators into buildings and adding additional floors onto buildings and having to put in new elevators through buildings. It is a challenge, but when you're able to step back and plan and design and work it through, it can be achieved. It does sound like from a few of the conversations, there's going to need to be better planning on all of that, because to do nothing wouldn't get you to the goals that I think everyone wants to make. To get.
Oh no, and please understand, that's what I was saying.
Exactly. So
it
the
will
second
be
point,
expensive though.
Depends.
That's what
There's some different options there. We've done different things in different buildings, but yes, it's not free. I guess expensive is qualified because how large is the project and how many things you're doing. For that size building, it's not too much. The flooding one, though, I do want to touch on quickly, because really neat example is you can design for and renovate for flooding in a few different ways. One of my favorite cases is the Evergreen Brickworks in Toronto, where they couldn't lift the brickworks up. It floods when the Don Valley floods. And so they designed to assume it would flood, and they planned their operations understanding it would flood and how to minimize their downtime. So there can be different ways to approach some of the things, but you're right, it has to be considered throughout.
And the point I was making there was more about the access to the building, because the downtown was flooded there. You couldn't take vehicles in, and they had to shut off the power because it was all underground power. So the building was effectively dead.
Thanks, Bruce, for pointing that out, and Tom for your answer. We only have a time for about two more, and that's what I see is two more hands. So Margot, I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself.
Thank you very much, Tayon, and thanks, David, for hosting this really important meeting. I think it's great. It's just the type of thing that we need. I was going to mention just recently, I was on a webinar where a developer was relaying his experiences in retrofitting a complete apartment building to make it into a passive building, like a passive solar building. And so it can be done. And I think, you know, those are the types of things. When I look at the Justice Building, I see that beautiful bank of windows all facing south. And as long as the trees aren't cut down, that's going to be a great source of energy and heat and all manner of things. The third floor, which was not replaced when the building was rebuilt, currently on the roof of that building are a lot of sort of HVAC things, ventilation and mechanical things that really detract from the appearance. So any any kind of future use would be well served, I think, by doing something to get rid of that stuff and perhaps replace it all with solar panels, all facing south, of course. And the other thing is that in the repurposing of that building, there's a great opportunity for equity building. And what I mean by that is that, you know, the tenders for the work to retrofit and insulate and replace windows, et cetera, can all be sort of targeted to underserved communities that could look at this as both a sort of a great training experience and to gain skills that are, you know, can be applied to other jobs. And I just think that is all about just transition. You know, that's how you get the social framework into these kind of climate oriented renovations. And then I guess the last thing I would say is that it would be really nice if the city were to replace the big elm tree that was lost at the side of the building this past summer. And so I'm going to be making that suggestion to our Parks and Trees people. There was some underground work there, but anyway, the tree is sorely missed. So those are my comments, and I'll let Myrna take over from there. Thank you.
Thanks, Margot. Myrna, are you there? Why don't you unmute yourself and we'll take your question now.
No, there was also Yusuf who's got his hand up.
Yeah, I know. Myrna had, Yusuf put his hand up after I talked to Myrna about having her, added her to my list here. But we will keep things to 5 minutes and get to Yusuf and then Ruth Muldrew if we can. So Myrna, can you just unmute yourself now?
No, Jane, go to Yusuf. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yusuf, can you unmute yourself and then we'll have Myrna. I don't hear. Oh.
Hello, can anybody hear me?
We hear you now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I just have a couple quick points. I shared some links. Hopefully, they were all shared within the group. But for me, from what I see is going on, is I think the best way to move forward on this is if we move forward as a community, as in the community ends up owning the building. And there's different ways to going about getting capital to help us raise the funds to do this. And there's programs out there. So if we tap into those, it's very much possible. And there's many examples that have been happened throughout Canada and that have been very successful at it as well. So that's one point that I want to make. The next point, one of the things that I find, and I've traveled all over North America as well as overseas. And one of the things that makes me, it's disappointing because the only time I feel that the city really becomes alive is during the Harvest Jazz and Blues Festival. We're closing down the streets and thousands of people are coming into the downtown core to interact and experience all the shows that are going on. Now, what happens when I've visited cities across North America, essentially after 5 o'clock, everybody goes home to the suburbs and, you know, they're not watching Game of Thrones anymore because that's done, but whatever the latest, most popular show. And so nobody lives and works, you know, downtown to the extent that I've seen in other cities, in other countries, where it is vibrant and alive at all hours of the day and evening. And it's almost, I feel like, you know, when you go into downtown Fredericton after 5, it's kind of like a dead zone. So this comes to my next point. I feel that one of the important purposes, if it can be done, it would be great to create a real third space for the downtown core. Because on many occasions, I have gone downtown to find a space to hang out with friends. And unless it's a private establishment, there's no public space that you can go and hang out with other people. So it's kind of going back to what Sarah Davidson was saying. You know, if we can have a place where people can congregate from all different walks of life, I think that would be a great addition to the downtown core. And my last point is I organize, along with another attendee of this session, group bicycle rides. So with Graham McAteer, and we essentially go do rides around the city and make stops to support local business, promote active transportation, and visit local nonprofits to bring awareness. So like the last one we did, we went to Hana Ethiopian restaurant. So we had around 40 people to show up, eat at a restaurant, and we went to the Hayes Urban Farm to take part in workshops. And we finished it off with a performance at the Harvest Jazz. So my thing is I'd like to continue building upon that. And personally, I think that I'd be definitely part and be willing to be part of an initiative to work with others in terms of organizations to set something up. So like on my end, I think it would be great to have a bike co-op. So a hub for the cycling community. So I'll just finish with that. And that's all I have to say for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Yusuf. Those are great ideas. I love them. Inspiring. Myrna, are you ready to ask your question? I think there are folks who would like to hear from you.
Well, I was just going to say I'm so grateful that this is happening tonight. And I feel the same way about downtown, although I understand that we also have a very big part. We have a very large uptown too. So we need to remember that as well. But is it possible, I don't know whether it was Bruce or who brought it up about the Playhouse, if we want to, is it a possibility to ever get back to the Playhouse, or has that already been finished?
The city owns the building, so that's maybe one of the councilors can speak to that.
Okay, yeah. So does the province own the Justice House, right?
Yeah,
Yes,
Province
okay.
owns the old Justice Building.
Exactly, yeah. Okay, that's all right. We don't need to answer that. I'm just, I was part of Dance Fredericton, and I know that that building is a wonderful building, so I'm just hoping that we can keep it going. And thanks everybody for doing this.
I think one thing that can answer a lot of questions really, really briefly is if you find the right use for the building that fits the broadest community, you know, again, what it would benefit the city the most and the region, the province, you know, what's good for Fredericton is good for New Brunswick. Yeah. If you can do that, then you find the right designers. It doesn't have to cost a lot of money. Usually the best solution is often the cheapest as well. And so this doesn't have to cost a lot of money. It comes with good planning. It's as Tom was saying, you just take your time, you be diligent, get the right people involved. It's not about spending money, it's about being smart. And all that can come to pass if we're good and we do it together.
We have just enough time for Ruth Muldrey's question, as long as it's a short one. Go ahead, Ruth.
It will be short. I just wanted to say that I'm very supportive of repurposing buildings, but it just seemed to me, and I was listening to some of the other people who seem to agree as well, it's a bit hypocritical to have all this effort put into saving just this one building without talking about the Playhouse, because it's also a building that needs to be saved. And it's also a situation where we have this extremely large space that has an auditorium. If we need a new performing arts center, that's the place for it. It's already got rehearsal space, it's already got an auditorium. And yet there's talking about tearing down the Playhouse and spending 60 or 80 million dollars building a new cookie cutter theater. It should be, if we're going to build a new theater, just look at the Justice Building. And it is a spot where you could repurpose, retain the architectural integrity of the exterior, even if you have to, you know, completely redo the interior. It seems to be that is a much greener, a much more historically accurate, and a better use of that building than trying to figure out a space that something to do with the Justice Building, tearing down the Playhouse and building a big brand new, you know, faceless theater in downtown Fredericton. So that's just, we seem to have a building that needs a purpose, and we have a purpose that needs a building, and those two would fit together really well. So
if I can, one of the things to that, and I certainly don't want this to be dismissive of your comments, because I agree. I mean, there needs to be a solution to the Playhouse of the performing arts in the city. I know early on there was some discussion years ago. Could the Justice Building, knowing then it was coming up, could that become retrofitted to a Playhouse? And the quick answer to that was not really, because as Tom was saying, there's certain buildings, you know, you're not going to make a parking garage an Olympic swimming pool. You know, the Justice Building, it can't, in its form, it can't really be configured. You'd have to destroy it and spend more money to make that a playhouse than to build a whole new playhouse or refit the existing playhouse. So it's, I think the talk of, even if it's culture, it's not about making the Justice Building into a performing arts facility. There may be some aspects in some parts, but it could never become the theater. It just, that's kind of a given. It just couldn't be. That auditorium is really small. It's not big enough at all to become the Playhouse equivalent. So I don't want to burst a bubble, but it's just, that's kind of a no-go.
I think Ruth's point was, can we save the Playhouse, the existing Playhouse? Is that right?
I think it's hypocritical to talk about saving the one building and not saving the that's just my opinion, and obviously a few other people have agreed as well. And I'm not sure that I quite agree with the point about the Justice Building not being able to. I mean, it's just a great big space. It could be used.
I think Tom has something to say to that, and then I'm gonna hand it to David to give closing, because we're at the end. Tom, did you have something?
No, I think generally I speak on all existing buildings, because that's, I think, has merit. So I would agree that there's no reason we should be ignoring buildings. I like Jane Jacobs' quote that new ideas need old buildings. Right, just the idea that sometimes when you're giving a weird space, it makes you rethink how you provide a service, and that rethinking can make you better at what you do. So they should both be kept. I think John has some valid points that one of the things, if you try and rethink how a theater is to fit into an existing space, as you said yourself, you have to effectively gut the building. As a structural engineer that works with the building behind the scenes, there's not much there that's original left anymore for me. And so I started saying it's a different building, but that's a better perspective too that comes up. So it's a different problem to gut the building, but we need all these buildings we should be keeping and finding ways for and using them to get us to innovate. And then we innovate further because we get into the habit.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, everybody, for all your great questions and this discussion. I'm going to let David have the final remarks and close the meeting. David, you're still muted. I should have asked you to unmute yourself.
All right, there we go. Yeah, I'll start off with thanking you, Taeyeon, for managing the questions and comments, because that's enabled me to really listen to what everyone's been saying and taking some notes at the same time. It's been a very rich discussion, and I want to thank everyone for taking some time out of your evening to contribute to it. It's fantastic, and I think we're off to a great start in terms of thinking about what kinds of things to bring forward. I mean, what I'm hearing for sure is the common theme that this needs to be public space to benefit people of this community and in all its diversity, and be a welcoming and affirming space that way. So that's a wonderful way. And I'm also struck by our experts, John and Tom and Jeremy, talking about things like building is going to be what it wants to be. Well, it's kind of an interesting thing to get your head around. So to ponder that a little bit, but I like it. So thank you all. Thank you, John and Tom and Jeremy for your time, for sharing your expertise and your viewpoints. We have such an amazing community here in Fredericton, and that was on display tonight in terms of the discussion and commentary that was shared on this very one specific item, which is the future of the Old Justice Building. There's so much to talk about. And look, actually, if you guys have suggestions for other virtual town halls like this that are across the riding, then please let us know, because these are not complicated to put on. At least I don't think they are, Tayon, right? You do all the organizing work, so she's smiling, so that's probably a good sign. Anyway, we could, it'd be great to have other ideas. You can drop us an email or give a phone call or whatever, which would be wonderful. And hopefully, too, I'll just say we'll be getting back to our regular sort of more neighborhood town hall community meetings that we had before COVID showed up, as we move hopefully successfully out of this current wave and into some new space, whatever that's going to be. But hoping, fingers crossed, that it's going to allow face-to-face meetings that are comfortable and secure for everybody in our various neighborhoods. So we'll look forward to that too. So thanks again, everyone. And I've got some notes here. We've got it recorded, and we'll put this together and bring that forward for discussions that are bound to happen soon with the province. So have a good night.